Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join together in marriage Julian and Chelsea. Today is a sign of your love for one another. It is the union of two people who were filing their taxes separately, but will now be filing as one. Marriage marks the start of annoying one special person for the rest of your life. Marriage is a beautiful bond. To symbolize that special bond, you will exchange wedding rings. Now the ring is an infinite circle, and it symbolizes the never-ending cycle of challenges and difficulty that lie ahead for both of you. Do you have the rings?
I do.
I do.
The vows you are about to take should be taken with caution and much consideration of their content. Julian, right here, bud. Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this?
Yes.
Chelsea, are you absolutely, positively sure you want to go through with this?
Yes.
Julian and Chelsea, are you both absolutely, positively, completely sure you want to go through with this?
Yes.
Then let's proceed. Please turn and face one another. Julian, place the ring on Chelsea's hand and repeat these vows after me. I, Julian, take you, Chelsea.
I, Julian, take you, Chelsea.
To be my lawfully wedded starter wife.
To be my lawfully wedded starter wife.
For better, not worse.
For better, not worse.
For richer, not poorer.
For richer, not poorer.
As we go deeply into debt.
As we go deeply into debt.
I promise to love you.
I promise to love you.
As much as I love the Red Sox.
As much as I love the Red Sox.
I promise to put down the toilet seat.
I promise to put down the toilet seat.
If I remember.
If I remember.
And to help change diapers once we have kids.
And to help change diapers once we have kids.
Unless the diaper's really bad.
Unless the diaper's really bad.
Like the time we fed my nephew guacamole.
Like the time we fed my nephew guacamole.
That was gross.
That was gross.
I promise I will try to eat your cooking.
I promise I will try to eat your cooking.
And I will not compare it to my mom's cooking.
And I will not compare it to my mom's cooking.
Which is so good.
Which is so good.
I love you from this day forward.
I love you from this day forward.
Till death do us part.
Till death do us part.
Or you become a Yankees fan.
Or you become a Yankees fan.
Beautiful. Now, Chelsea, place the ring on Julian's hand and repeat after me. I, Chelsea, take you, Julian.
I, Chelsea, take you, Julian.
To be my lawfully wedded starter husband.
To be my lawfully wedded starter husband.
For better, not worse.
For better, not worse.
For richer, not poorer.
For richer, not poorer.
As we try this out for a while.
As we try this out for a while.
I promise to run the checkbook.
I promise to run the checkbook.
Because we both know that your math skills are subpar.
Because we both know your math skills are subpar.
Like, really subpar.
Like, really subpar.
We're talking kindergarten level at best.
We're talking kindergarten level at best.
I promise to respect you.
I promise to respect you.
Even if one day you have to do a comb over.
Even if one day you have to do a comb over.
But please don't.
But please don't.
I promise to be kind to you.
I promise to be kind to you.
Unless you interrupt Game of Thrones again.
Unless you interrupt Game of Thrones again.
I promise to love you from this day forward.
I promise to love you from this day forward.
As long as you buy me shoes.
As long as you buy me shoes.
Till death do us part.
Till death do us part.
Julian and Chelsea, you have made this commitment hoping that you would be one of the lucky couples that can actually tolerate each other for a lifetime. And I admire your ambition. We wish you the best of luck. And because of the promise you have made to each other today, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride.
Good morning. Part of what makes a skit like that funny or humorous to us so we can giggle and we can laugh at it is, first off, we know we're joking around. Two, and this is really at the core of things, is that we know in our culture there's a really flawed perspective on how a lot of people enter into marriage. Sometimes people come in with just this idealistic ambition into getting married, and you'll hear them, they're getting married, and you're thinking, oh, do you know what you're headed into? This is challenging. This isn't just, TV. It's a challenge. And I've been asked over the years to be a part of a lot of different weddings, to officiate and lead weddings. And I've done weddings in a church environment. I've done weddings at the beach, in a home, in the park, country club. Did a wedding at the Disney Princess Castle. Just kidding. I heard somebody say, oh, if I ever get invited to do that, I'm dressing up as Gaston, guaranteed, That's happening. But I've been a part of doing a number of different wedding ceremonies, and whether they're traditional or more contemporary, there's always this point in the context of the ceremony that you come to the vows. And in the vows, I'll lead the couple through something along this lines. It will be their name, and let's say it's Carolee. Do you take Joel? And then it goes into to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, richer, poor, sickness, health. And then there's that line, until death do us part. And there's nothing about that idea about death do us part that sounds attractive. It's what it symbolizes. It's what it's implying, that this relationship's going to last. This relationship is for the long haul, that we're going to make it until one of us has to say goodbye to the other. And we're going to make it. This relationship will make it. The challenge, and we know this, is in our culture, there are a lot of things other than death that create the parting. For a lot of people, it's debt. Till debt do us part. We all know we've either lived it or we've been around it with friends or somebody who have had conflict and tension at home and in their marriage because of finances, and the finances create a lot of strain, and it creates a lot of argument, and creates a division and then separation, and the finances create a heaviness that some couples just don't get out of. Another thing could be kids. Like, the idea of kids sounds very idealistic. I've got 4 of them. But the reality of it is it's a challenge. And when the marriage goes from being husband and wife to mom and dad, that marriage changes. Mom and dad might not be able to do what husband and wife were able to do in spontaneity and with their relationship. And some couples don't adjust to that very well. And you trace it back, the wheels started to come off with the kids. And that's a challenge, till kids do us part. For some couples, it's boredom. They just give them enough years and they get bored with one another. It used to be spontaneous, used to be kind of, fresh. It was an exciting relationship. Given a period of time, it just gets boring, it gets routine. We just clock in, clock out, and go through the same, routines. And some people get bored with one another. Another one that's common in our culture right now, until Ashley Madison do us part. That was a game changer for a lot of people. But more than that website, it's what it speaks to. Sometimes people want something else. I want somebody else. I want something new. I want somebody that's not you. And that changes the game to where what started off as till death do us part never quite makes it there. And because so many marriages struggle along the way, in our culture, we look to classify and define the marriages that actually are thriving. There seems to be fewer and fewer as we proceed in culture, and because of it, some people try and classify it. And here's what is a common phrase. I guess for that couple, it was, here it is, meant to be. Like the others weren't meant to be. That one, because they're thriving and they're making it, they were just meant to be together. Or, here's another popular one, they found their soulmate. That sounds so good. You found your soulmate. And part of what ends up happening in the course of that is if I hit the skids in my marriage, I hit the skids in my relationship, I try and define it or explain it some way, and some people are in their pain or their frustration or whatever it might be, left with this definition or this explanation. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe they're just not my soulmate. Maybe they're not the one. I should keep looking for the one. In the course of this series, over the next few weeks, we're going to unpack Till Blank Do Us Part. And I got to say, whether you're single or married, whether you're in a great marriage or whether you're in a challenging marriage, whether you're just starting a young marriage or whether you're in the process of finishing an old marriage, I think we're going to cover some things over the next few weeks that I think will be helpful for us all. And they'll be helpful for us in all our relationships. We're going to cover some concepts that I think are applicable to all our relationships. We're just going to happen to take those principles and drill them down in the context of the marriage relationship. But no matter what you're going through, no matter what setting you're in, you'll be able to take, I believe, these concepts and still apply them throughout your life. And so today, to get us started, I'm going to push on something that seems to be counterintuitive towards marriage, seems to be counterintuitive towards this idea of till blank do us part. And I want to talk about till love do us part. Because this idea that love is the anchor for everything, the idea of that is that how could love do us part? The problem is that there's so many flawed perspectives on love and what it is and how we live it and how we do it and how we express it to one another that because if I have a flawed perspective on it, that idea of love can eventually become damaging to my marriage versus stabilizing my marriage. Because I can find myself, if I don't understand it accurately and I don't walk in it properly, I can pull back eventually and say, I don't love her anymore. She doesn't love me anymore. And there's a commodity to this relationship. There's a commodity to this marriage that now is missing, was once there, is now missing. And because it's missing, well, maybe we weren't meant to be. Or maybe I need to find someone else. And so we're going to push into this context. If you have your sermon notes, I want you to write something straight away at the top. It's a love truth, and there's no getting around. This is true for everybody. Love truth is this. It is very easy to fall in love. It is very difficult to stay in love. It's very easy to fall in love. It's very difficult to stay in love. This idea of falling in love, all you really need is a pulse. All you really need to do is be alive, and you can fall in love. We are aptly equipped to fall in love. People can fall in love in a heartbeat. I've heard of people that go on one date with somebody and come back, I'm going to marry that guy, or I'm going to marry her. We just fall in love quickly. And some of us in here might say, not me. I don't fall in love quick. I keep my barriers. You get with that person, you go on enough dates and your mind is wandering towards them. You start to feel that quiver in the liver and you're like, ooh, I just feel, you fall in love. But falling in love is a lot easier than staying in love. I was thinking about this question this week because our culture, so much of our culture, is trying to help people find love because we think if we can find love, we can fall in love, and if we fall in love, well, happily ever after. And I was thinking about the idea of how many dating sites are out there. How many sites are out there to help people find somebody? And I'm not against those sites. I've heard some fantastic stories from some of them. But I got to thinking about, I wonder, in the U.S., how many dating websites there are. Turn to somebody on your left or right and give them a number on how many you think there might be in the U.S. Tell them how many you think there might be. I was thinking there was probably about 100. Y'all just, oh, poor Joel, you know. There's 2,500 in the U.S. alone. I was like, 2,500 dating sites. I can find my soulmate. If you're not my soulmate, I can find my soulmate on some site. It's like the idea of falling in love, finding love is a lot easier. Let's say, for instance, the TV show The Bachelor. And some of you ladies, don't touch my Bachelor TV show. You know, The Bachelor is about helping some people under a certain context find love or fall in love. But come on, we know the statistics. Falling in love and staying in love are two different things. You looked at the statistics of how many people in those kind of environments or those shows or whatnot actually stay in love for a long period of time. That number is really, really, really low because of this reality. That falling in love is pretty easy. Staying in love is a challenge. And I would push it even one more degree. I would say that your story on how you fell in love will not necessarily help you stay in love. Like you might have a really romantic, cool story on how you fell in love. Joe, we went to this bar with our friends, and I wasn't even supposed to go, and I looked over there and saw, and you're talking about, we fell. It was eyes. It was just, I knew that night. And like that's going to help you with your kids down the road. Like that's going to help you when he gets fired down the road. Like that's going to help you when you have to have in-laws move into your home down the road. That story, as cool and sexy as it might be, does not help people down the road stay in love because it's easier to fall in love than stay in love. So how do we stay in love? And how do we not misappropriate this term love in our marriage so that we can finish where we're aiming? When it comes to the topic of love, Jesus has some really profound things to say about love. He was not naive or unaware of the concept. In fact, he taught really, really profoundly about it. If you have your Bible, I want you to open with me to John chapter 13, New Testament, book of John, chapter 13. In this passage, Jesus gives a command of love that sounds really simple on the surface, and we're going to try and push into it and unpack it. And I think you're going to find that it applies in our marriages in a huge way. If you say, Joel, but I'm not married, how do I apply it? This is going to apply hugely in all your relationships. But once again, we're just going to drill down in the context of marriage with it. So it says this in John chapter 13, verse 34. It says this, a new command I give you. So pause right there. It says, what I'm telling you is not a suggestion, okay? Like you want to win, you want to succeed. What I'm going to tell you, it's not a suggestion. You want to say, I'm not going to do that. That's on you, but don't anticipate success that comes from it. A new command, a new instruction. Here's the bullseye. Here's the target on the wall. Love one another. And we would stop right there and say, okay, that sounds simple. That sounds like something I could do. But how do you measure that? How do you quantify that? And he's going to give some terms. He's going to measure it against something. He's going to say, as I have loved you. Okay, well, there's a measurement. In the manner that I've loved you, in my model, in my example to you, that's the description, that's the token that you're going to use to compare or to model against. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. Now, we're going to leave this verse up for just a moment. It's an interesting statement and a context because he says a new command I give you. Here's why that's important. Jesus often dealt with commands and commandments. And the reason that Jesus so often dealt with commands or commandments is because that's what was always lobbied against him. When Jesus is being debated by a Pharisee or a teacher of the law, when he is being targeted or tested by somebody, they just about every time used the law. They used commandments. The Jewish culture in the ancient was so intricately entwined with the law of Moses, which comes from the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Inside of those 5 books of the Bible, we have the 10 Commandments. We know about the 10 Commandments. That God gives Moses these 10 Commandments. You shall have no other God before me. You shall not take the name of the Lord your vain. You shall not have an idol for yourself. And all these things: don't murder, don't steal, don't lie. These 10 Commandments, okay? We know about this. Also inside of those first 5 books of the Bible are 613 principles of the law of Moses. So this is where it gets a little complicated. 613 principles on how you carry out a life for God or worship with God. Sometimes in church circles, if you're around church long enough, you'll hear people say, yeah, but we're no longer under the law. No longer under the law of Moses. Well, what exactly are they talking about? The law of Moses consisted of 3 things. You'll see it up here. It consisted of, first off, the moral law of God, and that was the 10 Commandments. Let me just be very clear. We are still under the moral law of God. We are still under the 10 Commandments. Just because you're a Christian does not mean you get to go steal. Just because you're a Christian does not give you permission to go murder and say, I'm no longer under the law. We're always going to live under the moral law of God. I'm the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. Don't set up for yourselves idols. This is how we interact with the relationship with God. The second side of the law of God was the ceremonial law. And that got into the feasts. It got into festivals. It got into temple worship, how they would handle sacrifices. How did they deal with sin? Because they don't have a Savior, they would have scapegoats. And how do we do animal sacrifices? And how do we come to this temple and get forgiveness, so to say? Ceremonial law dealt with all of that. The next one, the third component, was civil law. Civil law was about community ethics. How do we interact with one another? He steals your land. He does something to your wife. She does something to your family. How do you interact in a community with one another? When somebody says we're no longer under the law of Moses, they would only be accurate about the bottom 2, ceremonial law and civil law. But on this context, follow me here. On this context, 613 principles, you had lots of division about how do you interpret these. You had some that were more liberal, more freeing, and because of that, they had a larger population that followed that line of thinking. You also had more of a conservative thought that were more strict and more stringent on things, and that had a group of people. So often, when Jesus is teaching, people would try and level him against one group or the other, trying to separate your influence from that group. I'm trying to separate your influence from that group. Jesus turns this on him, turns this on his entire audience, and he says, I'm going to give you a command. I'm going to give you a new command. Now, the word that he uses there for new was the Greek word kainos. And we might read the word new and in our mind immediately go to something that has never been. It's a new car, the car that has never been. It's a new house, the house that has never been. A new command, this command has never been. Kainos was a little different than that. Kainos was something that was often more overlooked, something that had been passed over, something that was fresh, something that was recent. As you can see on the screen, superior to what it follows, and even this was a powerful usage of this term, something that was unprecedented. Follow me here. The idea, I'm going to give you something that you've overlooked. I'm going to give you something that is superior to everything that you've been anchoring to. I'm going to give you something that you have just passed by, but this is unprecedented. If you want to have a relationship with God and you want to have a relationship with one another, in the context of our talk, in marriage, then this concept is unprecedented. You've got to have this in the event that you want to stay in love. He says, love one another. Now let's push into that term, because he uses this term love, and he uses a rather unique phrasing of the word love. Okay, let me push into something. The New Testament, for the most part, was written in a form of Greek called Koine Greek. And that was more of a spoken Greek form. It was so people understood the concepts of what was being expressed. You had 4 different terms for love. And we would see love, but they had very different visuals for the people. We'll have them up on the screen. You have this term that Jesus used, which we see is agapao. Agapao came to be just used as agape. Agapao was a word, follow me here, where Jesus takes the idea of love and transitions it from a noun to a verb. A noun being something you feel, something you have or you don't have, to something, as simple as this is, to do. This is a behavior. This is how you act. This is a verb. Now, you'll see up here, phileo was a friendly love. It's the kind of love that you have for your friends. We would all say, I have a friend in my life that I love. I love that guy. I love that girl. You know, we're friends. That would be phileo. Or you have family members that you love. That would be storge. That would be what you would use of your mom or your kids or your uncle, you storge. In your marriage, with a spouse, you might use the term eros. And you can probably connect it already to an English word, erotic. Something that was passionate, something that had lots of emotion, lots of energy. I feel eros for this person. And we could say that we got married, we started this marriage because of the passion we had for one another. I love him. I love her. I feel it. Problem is eros is more of a noun. And eros is something that can come and it can go. And Jesus says, if you want to really land correctly, then this is the unprecedented concept. Agapao, agape, active love. You've got to understand, you've got to allow in your process, in your relationship, in the context of marriage, you have to allow love to become a verb. I want you to write this in your notes. Very simple concept here. A love foundation. The foundation for staying in love is to make love a verb. Now, some of you men are snickering because you're like, I wanted to put the exclamation point up right before the fill in the blank, you know. The foundation for staying in love is to make love, period. You would be talking about eros. Problem with eros is it comes and goes. Problem with eros is you might have it for a period, but when you're in debt, eros is a challenge. You might have the in-laws that have to move in, and eros becomes a challenge. You might have kids, and you went from that transition from husband and wife to mom and dad, and that's a very difficult transition, and eros is a little more different. It's a little more different in the relationship. Agapo, or agape, is an interesting term because it's a verb. Follow me on this. You can have agapao, you can have this active love even when you're exhausted. Like you can be 8 years into your marriage. You can be 12 years into your marriage and you can be exhausted right now. And you can still agape. You can still be active in your love. You can be frustrated right now. I'm frustrated with work. I'm frustrated with finances. I'm frustrated. You're frustrated. We're both frustrated. But we can still be verb love. We can still be active love. We can still agapao one another. You can be feeling stuck. You can feel even, let me push into tough water, you can even be at a point that you feel like quitting. You feel like quitting. And you can still have the choice of agapao. See, here's the problem. When it's a noun, if in your marriage love is just a noun, it's eros, it's what we feel or we don't feel, then I promise you at some point in time, love in your marriage will become like a pool that you fall into, or it'll become like a chair that you fall out of. We'll be in it or we'll be out of it. We'll be in it or we'll be out of it. And it's something I can fall into, but it's hard to stay in it. And it becomes something like a chair that I often fall out of. Or it can become a verb, something that I'm going to actively pursue. And when it becomes a verb, it changes my commitments. It changes my attitudes and my behaviors. I've had lots of conversations over the years with people that are struggling, and I've heard this statement by numerous people. I don't know that I love him anymore. And when I've heard it, I've challenged the person before, whether it's a him or a her. I don't know if I love her anymore. Are you talking about a noun or a verb? They're like, what do you mean? Are you saying that you don't feel these things anymore? Or are you saying, I've chosen not to serve anymore? I've chosen to stop being gracious at home. I've chosen to stop forgiving. If you say, I don't know if I love him anymore, I don't know if I'm going to forgive him anymore. I don't know if I'm going to be gracious anymore. I don't love him anymore. I don't know if I'm going to be compassionate to him anymore. Jesus is landing on something pertaining to relationships that is utterly profound. The unprecedented command is if you want to see relationships thrive, somehow you have to make a commitment to have your love be a verb and your love become very active. The Apostle Paul is going to pick up on this idea in 1 Corinthians 13. In 1 Corinthians 13 is kind of one of this landmark passages on love where many people are familiar with it. And he's going to push into this idea of describing love. When you describe love this way, it's going to be helpful as we read this to think, here's the term, think of active love. Because the term that Paul is using is agapao. He's using this active form of love. So it says in 1 Corinthians 13, he says, love is patient. So let's say active love is patient. Like the noun love might not be patient. The verb love is going to be patient. The verb love is going to be kind. Agapao doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. It's not proud. It's not rude. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. Keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Agapao always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Agapao, and here's a really difficult statement. Love, agapao, active love, never fails. Time out, Joel. Because I've watched some relationships fail. I've watched what I thought was love fail. I've experienced it. I've seen it. It's been up close. I've lived it or I've observed it. And this is a real challenge here. One of the words that he uses here for fails is ekpipto. It's a Greek word, ekpipto. And ekpipto is a very visual term. It's an interesting term. It's the visual of a flower that is dying and losing its petals. If you had a flower that was dying and losing its petals, they would use this term, ekpipto, and it was a visual that translated into a lot of different things. You think about relationships. Let's push into that. When does the relationship, narrow it down, when does the marriage start to die and lose its petals? At what point in how I view my spouse does it start to die and I start to lose the petals? I'm not saying that there aren't ever challenges. I'm not saying that there aren't ever any obstacles to overcome. But I do know that when active love for an individual starts to cease, I'm not going to forgive anymore. I'm not going to serve anymore. I'm not going to be gracious anymore. I'm not going to reach and touch anymore. When that active love starts to stop, the petals start to fall. And the challenge in our marriage for all of us is to how do I continue to maintain active love, agapao, still reaching out so that I might not go into that place. Now, Paul is going to continue with this idea, and he's going to say in 1 Corinthians 13, continuing in the same chapter, he says this, and now these three remain, and he gives three very concrete words, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. Faith would be our relationship with Christ. I've got to have a relationship with Christ, yield to Him. I want to become the person that God has called me to be. And then there's this interesting word, hope. And here's why hope is such an interesting word in the context of marriages. is because we all hope for something out of marriage. You might not be able to articulate in detail exactly what it was, but we all hope in marriage that there's respect. We hope that there's going to be appreciation. We hope that there's going to be comfort. We hope that there's going to be encouragement. We hope that there's going to be support and partnership and approval and affection. We hope for some certain things, okay? Now, so many people go in with this very, very powerful force called hope as a photo, as a painting of what they hope for in their marriage. The problem is that reality often looks very different than what they hoped for. Hope paints a photo, and reality is usually a lot less exotic and epic than what we hoped for. Men, I hoped for intimacy, fill in the blank, number of times throughout the week. Reality, it's a lot less epic and exotic. I hoped his companionship and affection and romanticism towards me would never change. It would maintain, even if we have kids, even if we're struggling, finding a hope. And reality might look a lot less epic and exotic. And the reality is, when we look at what we're really living in relationships, some people start to wonder, is this meant to be? Would I have those feelings with somebody else? Once again, I've just seen this idea of falling in love is so easy, and how I fell in love is so easy, but it does not help me answer the reality questions. I've watched young people get down on that knee and will you be my wife? And they give this whole depiction, I want to live my life with you, and I just can't imagine a second without you, and blah, 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 And I'm like, you're going to have kids one day. One of you is going to get fired at some point. Trace it out far enough. One of you is going to have one set of your parents moving in. One of you is going to get sick, or your kid's going to get sick. You're going to have life. And when you're on your knee and you're painting the picture of hope and idealism and how we fell in love, it'll be strong enough to help us get through anything. It's not true. And y'all know this. We all know this. It becomes challenging down here. It becomes really challenging. Why? Because staying in love is a lot more difficult than falling in love. And Jesus gives us the understanding on how to do it. The only way for you to stay in love for the duration, like if you really want that till death do us part to be descriptive of your marriage, then the foundation of it is somehow, some way, love has to be active. Love has to be a verb. And it's not something that you just are going to feel all the time. And here's why I say this. Let me push into another concept. And nobody's exempt from this. Not one person is exempt from this. And you could have been married right now for 30 plus years with your spouse, and you still have the capacity of this as well. Every single one of us have the ability to change how we see and respond to somebody. Over a period of time, every single one of us can change how we see and respond to somebody. So the person that you saw and you like, I'm going to be with this person, and it's always going to be beautiful, and it's always going to be fantastic. Over a period of time, over a given set of circumstances, if love is just a noun, we either have it or we don't have it. It's a pool we fall into or it's a chair we fall out of. Eventually, you can change how you see that person. I'll give you a passage where Jesus was seen one way and in a turn was seen another. It comes in Mark chapter 6. Jesus had taught in many, many different places, and when he taught, he healed. So he would have a teaching ministry and a healing ministry, and thousands of people by scores came out to him. Blind eyes are being healed, lepers are being healed, paralytics are being healed. It was just an amazing environment. Jesus is going to travel back to his hometown. Word of this is going to come, and people are going to respond to him. It says Jesus in verse 1, chapter 6, Jesus left there, went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue. Many who heard him were amazed. Where did this man get these things, they asked. What's this wisdom that has been given him that he does miracles? Stop right there. 2 words, amazed. We're listening to you and we are amazed. We're not like, wow, he's pretty good. We're amazed. We're at a whole level that we've seen something and hear something that's unique on a whole different level. We are amazed. And there's miracles that mark you. In one turn, they're going to see him very differently. Look at verse 3. Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, only in his hometown among his relatives and in his own house is a prophet without honor. Stop right there. A, we're amazed at what you're saying. And we are amazed at the miracles that we're hearing about and seeing. B, wait a minute. We know something about you. You're Joseph's son. You're the carpenter. And somehow in this turn, B overrides A. A, will you marry me? I just can't wait to spend my entire life with you, blah, blah, blah. B, you're 7 years in. You've got some sickness, or you've got debt, or you've got struggles, you've got kids, you've got challenges. Love's a noun. It's a chair we're falling out of. And B is overriding A. And I see you different now. I said I just didn't want to be with anybody else. But now I see you completely different. There are things that can happen along our way that change how we see somebody. Let me jump out of the marriage context. You can reach your hand over to a boss and say, I'd love to work for you. And you can have great admiration for that boss or great admiration for your coworkers. And over a period of time, something can change how you see or respond to them. You can have people in your life that you see in an admirable way. You just admire them. You're inspired by them. But something along the way changes, and it changes how you see and respond to them. This can happen in marriage all the time. And so we got to really pay attention to how we do this. He continues on, verse 5. He could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. In your notes, I want you to write this. This is your truth. And when I say your truth, that means this is true for each one of us. There's no one exempt from this. I've yet to meet the person that's exempt from this. You and I have the ability to change how we see and respond to somebody. And so if that's true positively or negatively, then I've got to approach, in the context of our talk, my marriage in a way that I maintain actively loving them so that I don't change how I see them over the course of time. If anything, I become more and more fond of them or admiration of them because I'm actively loving that person. Love commitment. Love commitment. Active love will continue attempting to close the gap between intentions and actuality. And what I mean by that is, if all of this is true, guys, if all of this is true, for most of us, there is a gap between our intentions and what is reality or what is actuality. Intentions are when these two come together and they stand apart from one another and they say for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness or in health. That is their great intention. That is what they hope for. But reality might create some gaps in that. Reality might be tough down the road. How do you shrink that gap? How do you take reality and those ambitions or intentions and shrink it to where there's very little gap between it? In my opinion, it's active love. If it's just a noun where it's a pool I fall into and a chair I fall out of, then I will find myself eventually changing how I see my spouse. But if I try and be active in that love, I can start over time to reduce the gap between the intentions and the actuality. And I can, follow me, I can start actively loving my spouse every single day. Now I'm going to challenge us all. I've challenged the other two services. I'm going to challenge you guys. I'm challenging myself too. What would it look like in the course of this week? In the course of this week, whether it be in your marriage or outside of your marriage, to your coworkers, to the people in your life, that you lived out these basic principles that we're going to push on here in just a second. What would it look like in our marriage if we did this? Here's 3 very simple things. If you feel something loving, say it. In your notes, write these down. If you feel something loving, say it. Isn't it true, guys, that silence speaks? Silence speaks. You do something for somebody, you bless somebody, and then they don't say thank you. You're like, sucker, I'm not doing another thing for you. Then come back to me and say thank you. Are you kidding me? Their silence spoke. Your kids, you tell your kids, hey, do you have any homework? They look at you. Your silence about to get you jacked up, you know. Talk to me. Silence speaks. Listen, you may feel something loving towards your spouse. You need to say it this week. Okay? But I don't feel that much. I don't feel that much now. No, you need to say something. You need to say something this week. You need to say it when you feel it. I feel admiration for you. I feel respect for you. I feel whatever that might be, you say something. If you feel something, you say it. Second thing is if you think something, you do it. If you think something loving this week, do it. Like you might say, you know, honey, I thought about coming home and cleaning the house for you and vacuuming and having dinner ready for you. I didn't do it. I thought about it. Bring it in, you know. You get no points. You get no points for that. Had you done it, you know, if you think it, do it. If you think it, do it. And I said to the other services, you know, my wife and I, in 2 weeks, we will celebrate 19 years of marriage. And we used to write letters all the time to one another. Didn't have email, didn't have texting or any of that. There's a box underneath our bed where I sleep, and that box underneath the bed has all the letters she's ever written me. Every birthday card, everything I've ever had over the years. And by default, you get, you know, into technology, and it can just become a text. I send a text. And then it's all fast-paced, and I think it, but don't do it. You don't even send the text now, you know. We can all fall victim to thinking something and not doing it. Maybe you need to, in that kind of context, pull out the pen and paper, and you need to write a letter this week. And you're like, yeah, but we live together now. You need to write that letter, put it in the mail, let her get a letter from you. You need to, if you think it, do it. For every single one of us. And this isn't just marriage, but it's in context of marriage. If you feel something, say it. If you think something, do it. And then lastly, if you want something loving, be it. If you want something loving, be it. I want grace, then be grace. I want compassion, then be compassion. I want a spouse that doesn't yell at me, then don't yell at them. If you want something loving, then be it. And there's something very powerful to the practicality of actively loving our spouses. Until love do us part. For many people, love's a noun. It's a chair they're falling out of. What if it's a verb? What if we say, okay, if I'm going to pour my energy into actively loving them, maybe, just maybe, the petals don't die in my life and my heart and how I see them and how I respond to them. Maybe I can keep the petals fresh. I can keep the flower fresh. And I can make it for the duration, because staying in love is a lot harder, but I'm willing to do it. Faith, hope, and love. Need my relationship with the Lord. The hope is a good thing to understand and be shooting at. Shrink the gap between that hope and what's reality. And we do so by actively loving our spouse. All across the room, let me pray for us. Father, this morning we thank you for this time, and I pray, Father, that you'd help us all. Whether we're single in here today or whether we're married, whether our marriage is great or whether our marriage is really rocky right now, we all need your help. Jesus, we all need your touch. None of us can love on our own. None of us can consistently, continually do this in and of our own efforts. We pray for the grace. That's why you said, as I have loved you. We receive your love this morning. And in receiving your love, help us to be an extension of loving outwardly and actively to the people around us, and certainly if we're in a marriage, to our spouse. Pray that you'd help couples this week extend grace and love to one another. This morning you might be here and you don't have a relationship with the Lord, but you know you need to. It starts with faith. You got to have faith. You got to have a relationship with the Lord. And the beauty of a relationship with Jesus is it's a clear invitation he gives us. It's just responding to that invitation. The Bible says if we believe in our heart, confess with our mouth, we shall be saved. You might be here this morning and you know you need to have a relationship with Jesus. If that's you, I'm going to say a prayer, and just right where you are, you can pray this prayer with me. And just offer your life to the Lord this morning. It might be for the first time or you might be returning, but pray this prayer and just say, Jesus, I give you my life today. I acknowledge that you died for me. Your blood forgives my sins. And you have a plan for my life. Help me to follow that plan from this day forward. I love you this morning. Jesus, we thank you for a time together as a church family. Would you bless your people this morning? In Jesus' name. Everybody said, amen.